Have you ever seen the movie The Matrix? Do you remember the guys in The Matrix that had the sunglasses and the suits and they were always after Neo and they were called agents, right? Well, do you remember how they would fight and they would kill the agents, but then they would always come back? They'd bounce back to life and they were sometimes even stronger than before. That's what happens when a narcissist experiences narcissistic injury. And by the way, welcome to my channel. My name is Sparrow Spalding. I am a narcissistic abuse recovery specialist and a trauma recovery specialist. And I talk a lot on this channel about narcissistic abuse and abuse recovery. So if it's your first time here, welcome. Now, a lot of people talk about narcissistic injury and they basically say that a narcissist can get mad and upset from every perceived slight or criticism. And that is true. And those are your everyday narcissistic injuries, right? You know, you can't blink funny, or you can't say to them, hey, you've got some spinach in your teeth, without them getting upset, overreacting, every little thing, right? But today I'm going to talk about true narcissistic injury, when they are really brought to their knees, when their whole false sense of self just completely collapses, and you get to see the real them, which is really interesting because they're vacant and they're vapid because they don't have that core sense of self. So what happens in those cases a lot of times is they will just either have a complete crying meltdown or they will literally scream and wail. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So the first one I'm going to give you is actually in my memoir, Writing Standing Up, and it's a conversation I had with my mom when I was a teenager. And she was criticizing me for something which she was very critical, and she used to point the finger and, you know, always griping, always bitching, always complaining about something. And as I aged, as I got older, I got mouthier and mouthier. And one time she was criticizing me for something. I can't recall exactly what it was, but I think she was trying to say I had too much of a party lifestyle and I needed to cut back or whatever, which, you know, at the time I really didn't. But I said something to her that really dismantled her sense of self. And what I said was, and by the way, it was very mean and I wouldn't say it today, but my adolescent self, rebellious self said it. I looked her in the eye and I said, why would I take any advice from you, you 3-time loser? And she had had children with 3 different men, and I never really respected her for it. And she looked at me and she screamed and she covered her face in shame and she ran out of the room. That's a true narcissistic injury. I really just pierced her false sense of self, her high and mighty, I know everything, you know nothing, bitch persona, basically. And that's what was left, was her pure shame that she was just left holding, and she couldn't handle it. She couldn't look at me. She literally covered her face. She ran away in shame. You know what? I felt really bad about that instantaneously, of course, in part because there was a lot of codependency in my family growing up, right? And I felt responsible for my mom's feelings. But also, you know, I regret making that statement. That's not a person I wanted to become. That's what I was learning from my environment, my surroundings. So that's a true narcissistic injury. Now, what happens is, you know, they go away for a little bit, they lick their wounds, they reinforce their false sense of self, and then they come back either acting like it never happened, or they come back to get you with a vengeance, right? But a lot of times, especially with covert narcissists, my mom was more of an overt narcissist, but the covert narcissists, a lot of times they will just pretend it never happened. Now, they won't forget. They'll probably ruminate about it over and over and over in their head, but they're going to pretend like it never happened because they have to reinforce that false sense of self and that false reality, right? They're living in la la land, and they won't even come back and have a conversation about it typically. Unless, you know, every once in a while you get a real victim-y covert narcissist, and then they'll want to make you feel bad about the statement and they'll bring it up ad nauseum, you know, over and over and over again for years and years and years and years, right? Typically that's more of a borderline, but sometimes a covert narcissist can do that too. Another example I'm going to give you is a teenage boy that I worked with. And I had worked with his family. He was a bit on the spectrum, and not full-blown autism, but he was on the spectrum. He had some learning disabilities, he had some ADD, and he was an only child, and his parents completely coddled him. I mean, completely coddled him and hyper-focused on him, in part because their relationship wasn't good, right? So they both hyper-focused on this kid. And I came into the picture, I want to say when he was maybe about 13. And I gave them all kinds of parenting suggestions, parenting advice. I chatted with him. They really could never follow through on the parenting. Either mom would sabotage or dad would sabotage. I mean, it was really awful. So this kid, his behavior just kept escalating. And one of the things he did was he threatened to blow up his school. I mean, I'm not exaggerating this. And the FBI were even called. I mean, can you believe this? And so I'm talking to this kiddo, and he's so manipulative, and he tells me the reason that he did this is because his self-esteem is low and he doesn't feel good about himself, and he just came up with these nonsense excuses. Now, do I think his self-esteem was low? Of course I do. But it was very clear that it wasn't that led to him threatening to blow up the school. And he was very good about saying, well, and, I'm thinking I might hurt myself, like very good at eliciting, empathy and all this compassion out of people. And he had played his parents like this for years. And I looked at him and I said, I don't buy that at all. I don't think that's true. And you can pull this over on your parents. You can't pull it over on me. And I looked at him and I said, what you did was really, really wrong. This was bad behavior. It's violent and it's unacceptable. And you're not going to be able to manipulate me. And he literally looked at me and he screamed, kind of like the last example I gave you. He didn't cover his face, but he screamed, he kind of did this thing, and he ran out of the room, and he refused to ever speak to me again. So I had to refer him elsewhere, but sadly, I kept working with his parents, and then eventually I just worked with his mom. And at the end of 4 years, I think, they were not going to change. They were still so invested. What I later realized, and this is probably info for another video, is I realized that they were invested in him being dysfunctional, so they didn't have to look at themselves, because these were two very seemingly normal, yet behind the scenes, highly dysfunctional parents. But really obvious that this kiddo, and lots of other behaviors that he had, he was just, by the time he was 17, he was pretty narcissistic. And, his parents, his dad, more of an overt, his mom, more of a covert narcissist, but also really codependent. And they just poured narcissism into this child, sadly. And I really, at the end of the day, I said his best bet is to go and live with somebody else, to go and live with a friend or a family member, or even go into therapeutic care. I mean, he needed to get away from them if he had a fighting chance. So that's basically what happens with the narcissistic injury. Now, I'm sure he reinforced his false sense of self, but it wasn't with me. He refused to ever talk to me or look me in the eye again, because again, I had to call that out. So that's what that looks like. A lot of times in adolescence, if you catch it early enough on, if his parents really got on board, we might have been able to save him, like to change the trajectory of how his personality was developing. Because remember, it's plastic, as we're developing. And, is the personality plastic throughout life? Yeah, to some degree. But with personality disorders, once they're developed, they're pretty fixed. And so I do believe, and I have had experiences with other adolescents where we were able to really change course for them with a lot of effort. But in this situation, the parents just reinforced his false sense of self and his lies, and that kiddo will probably eventually end up in jail. Sadly, I hate to say that, but he had other violent tendencies and theft and, just other horrible things, unfortunately. So remember, with any kind of narcissist, they can insult you all day long. But if you insult them, then of course it's the end of the world. And again, there might be little things, there might be critiques, suggestions, all of that's going to be awful. But when you really lay it on them and you throw the truth bomb, then they will collapse. Now you might think, oh my gosh, they're starting to break open. They see the light, they're crying. No. This is just them temporarily feeling the pain of not having a sense of self, the utter shame that they've been holding in for all the years. And they're going to feel it a little bit, and then they're going to build themselves right back up. They're going to come back like that agent in the Matrix. And again, they might come back even stronger than before. So don't be fooled into thinking, because it's happened to me, it's happened to my clients, where you go, oh wow, okay, this person's broken down, but really they've broken open, and now we can get somewhere. No, not really. I mean, 99% of the time, it's just fake news. It's not going to happen. So I really want to hear from you guys. Drop a line down below and let me know what your experience is with severe narcissistic injury, what happens. A lot of times, sometimes do narcissists, commit acts of self-harm during these times? It's possible. It doesn't happen very often, in my opinion. I feel like it's more borderline personality disorder that commits the acts of self-harm or suicidal behaviors. But sometimes it can happen with a narcissist. But just remember, that's not yours to take on. This is all about them and their stuff. But yeah, when they really break down, when they freak out or they have that meltdown cry, it's not them growing a personality. It's not them growing a conscience or a heart. It is them feeling the pain of their own existence / lack of their own existence. So guys, if this was helpful, please click below, like, share, and subscribe. As always, hug yourself from me, and we'll see you next time.